The Galactic Council chamber hummed with the collective arrogance of 1,000 civilizations. Ambassador Thexvar of the Korthani Empire adjusted his ceremonial scales, each one polished to mirror perfection, as he reviewed the latest intelligence reports from the Outer Rim territories. The humans had finally submitted their application for membership in the Council, and the very thought made his throat sacs inflate with barely contained laughter. "Pathetic primitives," he muttered to his aide, Vexlon, whose own scales rippled with amusement. "Look at this technological assessment. They still use combustion engines for personal transport. Their fastest ships barely achieve .2 light speed. And this," he gestured at a holographic display showing Earth's submitted prototype vessel. "This is what they call their greatest achievement." The human ship looked like something a child might construct from scrap metal. Where Korthani vessels flowed like liquid mercury through space, all curves and organic beauty, the human prototype was angular, brutal, and utterly without aesthetic sense. Its hull was a patchwork of different metals, clearly cobbled together from whatever materials these backwards creatures could scrape together. "Ambassador," Vexlon said, his voice carrying that particular tone of superiority that had made the Korthani the most feared diplomatic force in the galaxy, "perhaps we should consider the humans' request more carefully. Our intelligence suggests they have certain, unusual qualities." Thexvar's laugh was like the sound of wind through crystal caves. "Unusual? Yes, I suppose being exceptionally primitive is unusual in this day and age. Look at their military records, Vexlon. In their entire recorded history, they have never fought a war that lasted longer than a few of their short years. Their longest conflict barely spanned a century. Compare that to the great Korthani Zephyrian War that raged for 3 millennia. These humans know nothing of true warfare." The aide pulled up another holographic display, this one showing human population statistics. "Their breeding rate is concerning, Ambassador. They reproduce at nearly 10 times the rate of any civilized species." "Quantity over quality," Thexvar dismissed with a wave of his clawed hand. "Typical of lower species, when faced with superior technology and tactics, numbers mean nothing. The Zarathi learned that lesson when we reduced their homeworld to glass with a single dreadnought." As if summoned by their conversation, the human delegation was announced. Thexvar watched with barely concealed disgust as 3 humans entered the chamber. They were even more repulsive in person than in the intelligence photos. Bipedal, awkwardly balanced, with strange hair-like growths on their heads and faces. They wore simple uniforms of a dull gray material that looked like it might have been woven from plant fibers. The lead human stepped forward and performed what Thexvar assumed was meant to be a bow, though it looked more like a stumble. "Ambassador Thexvar, I am Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. We are honored by this opportunity to address the Galactic Council." Her voice was flat and monotonous, lacking the musical qualities that marked truly evolved species. Worse, she spoke in the common trade language with an accent so thick it was almost unintelligible. Had heard more sophisticated communication from the slug-like gastropods of Kepler-7. "Captain Chen," Thexvar said, deliberately mispronouncing the name to emphasize its barbaric origins. "Your species has submitted a request for council membership, along with what you laughably call a technological demonstration. I trust you understand that membership in the Galactic Council is not granted lightly. We represent civilizations that have mastered faster-than-light travel for millennia, reshaped entire star systems to our will, and transcended the primitive needs that still drive your kind." Captain Chen's expression remained neutral, which Thexvar found irritating. Lesser species usually showed proper deference when confronted with their obvious inferiority. "We understand the significance of council membership, Ambassador. That's why we've brought our newest prototype for demonstration. We believe it represents a significant advancement in human technology." Vexlon stepped forward, his scales rippling with barely contained mirth. "Captain, we have reviewed your technical specifications. Your prototype appears to be constructed from multiple incompatible metal alloys, powered by a fusion reactor that by our calculations should have exploded the moment you attempted ignition, and equipped with weapons systems that would be considered antique by our standards 1,000 years ago." The second human, a male with graying hair growth who introduced himself as Dr. Harrison Kim, spoke up. "Our approach to technology might seem unconventional, but we've found that sometimes the most effective solutions come from combining existing systems in unexpected ways." Thexvar's throat sacs inflated again. "Combining existing systems? Dr. Kim, do you understand that the Korthani Empire has been perfecting starship technology since before your species discovered fire? Our vessels are grown, not built. Each ship is a living entity, capable of self-repair, evolution, and adaptation. Your prototype is nothing more than dead metal held together by primitive adhesives and hope. Perhaps, Captain Chen said quietly, you would be interested in a demonstration. The suggestion was so absurd that Thexvar almost choked on his own laughter. A demonstration? Captain, are you suggesting that your primitive vessel could somehow impress beings who have mastered the fundamental forces of the universe? Very well. Consider this an opportunity to learn humility before your species attempts to join civilized society. Vexlon activated a holographic display showing the Korthani fleet positioned just outside the solar system. 12 massive vessels, each one a masterpiece of bioengineering, their hulls shifting and flowing like living tissue. The smallest of them was 3 kilometers long and could sterilize a planet's surface in under an hour. The Council has prepared a simple test, Thexvar explained, his tone dripping with condescension. Your prototype will engage one of our scout vessels in a tactical exercise. The scout is unarmed, of course. We wouldn't want to accidentally vaporize Earth's greatest achievement. The objective is simple: disable our vessel's propulsion system without causing permanent damage. Captain Chen nodded. Understood. May I ask the specifications of the scout vessel? 800 meters in length, adaptive bioarmor plating, quantum phase shields, and FTL capability, Vexlon recited. Standard Korthani construction, nothing that should challenge a species ready for galactic citizenship, of course. What Thexvar didn't mention was that, even unarmed, the scout vessel's defensive capabilities were beyond anything these primitives had ever encountered. Its bioarmor could adapt to any known weapon type within seconds, rendering further attacks useless. The quantum phase shields operated on principles that human science hadn't even theorized yet. This wouldn't be a test. It would be a lesson in the vast gap between human ambition and galactic reality. When would you like to conduct this demonstration? Captain Chen asked. Immediately, Thexvar declared. The Council's time is valuable, and this charade has already consumed more attention than your species warrants. The third human, a young female technician named Lieutenant Rodriguez, finally spoke. Captain, should I signal the Phoenix? The Phoenix, Vexlon inquired, scales shifting to a pattern that indicated curiosity mixed with amusement. You named your prototype after a mythological creature? How? Quaint. The Phoenix is currently in Earth orbit, Captain Chen explained. We can have it here within the hour. Thexvar's throat sacs deflated slightly. An hour to travel from Earth to the outer system? That would require speeds approaching their own vessel's capabilities. Perhaps these humans had managed to steal some advanced technology, though from whom remained a mystery. No matter, whatever they had cobbled together would still be generations behind true Korthani engineering. Very well, 1 hour. The scout vessel will be waiting at the designated coordinates. As the human delegation filed out of the chamber, Thexvar turned to his aide. Contact Admiral Kexthin. Have him prepare a full tactical analysis of whatever these primitives bring to the demonstration. If they've somehow acquired advanced technology through theft or trade, I want to know the source. Should we be concerned, Ambassador? Our scouts report unusual energy readings from the human homeworld. Thexvar's laugh echoed through the chamber. Concerned? About a species that still fights wars with chemical explosives. Vexlon, the humans are about to learn what separates true galactic powers from delusional primitives clinging to dreams of grandeur. This demonstration will be remembered as the moment humanity finally understood their place in the universe. 57 minutes later, sensors throughout the Korthani fleet began registering an impossible reading. Something was approaching at speeds that shouldn't have been achievable by any known propulsion system. The energy signature was unlike anything in their databases, not biotechnology like their own ships, not crystalline matrices like the Zephyrian vessels, not even the plasma conduits favored by the militant Zarathi. Admiral Kexthin contacted the command ship, his usually steady voice carrying a note of confusion. Ambassador, we're detecting an incoming vessel, but the readings don't match human technological capabilities. Are you certain they haven't acquired assistance from another council species? Thexvar activated the main viewing screen just as the human prototype dropped out of whatever impossible drive system it was using. For a moment, there was absolute silence on the bridge. The vessel that appeared before them defied every principle of advanced engineering the Corthani held sacred. It was exactly as the technical specifications had described: angular, crude, a patchwork of different materials that should have torn itself apart under the stresses of high-speed travel. But somehow, impossibly, it had just demonstrated speed capabilities that rivaled their finest military vessels. "Run a detailed scan," Thexvar ordered, his voice lacking its earlier confidence. "I want to know how they're generating that much velocity with such primitive technology." The scanning results were even more confusing. The human vessel's power output was enormous, far beyond what their fusion reactor should have been capable of producing. The hull, which appeared to be simple metal plating, was somehow maintaining structural integrity under gravitational forces that would have crushed most conventional materials. And the weapons systems. "Ambassador," the scanning officer reported, his scales shifting to colors indicating deep confusion. "The weapons readings don't make sense. According to our instruments, they're using modified mining lasers, rail guns that appear to be built from recycled mass drivers, and some kind of projectile system that fires what our computers are identifying as metal slugs." "Metal slugs," Thexvar's voice rose an octave. "They're planning to fight with kinetic projectiles against adaptive bioarmor." The communication system crackled to life. Captain Chen's voice came through clearly, though her tone remained as flat and professional as before. "Corthani scout vessel, this is the UEDF Phoenix. We are ready to begin the tactical exercise at your convenience." Thexvar activated the communication channel to Admiral Kexthin. "Admiral, begin the demonstration. Show these primitives what happens when inferior technology meets Corthani engineering. But be prepared for unexpected variables. Something about this situation doesn't feel right." The scout vessel moved into position, its bioarmor already beginning to adapt to the Phoenix's scanning frequencies. The quantum phase shields powered up, creating a barely visible distortion field around the ship's hull. Every system was optimized for defense. The humans would need to find a way through 8 centuries of advanced defensive evolution. Captain Chen's voice came through the communication system again. "Beginning tactical approach, all weapon systems armed and ready." What happened next would be debated in Council archives for generations to come. The human vessel didn't behave like any starship the Corthani had ever encountered. Instead of trying to penetrate the scouts' shields with energy weapons, the obvious approach for any civilized species, the Phoenix seemed to dance around the larger vessel, firing seemingly random bursts from its crude projectile weapons. "What are they doing?" Vexlan asked, watching the tactical display with growing confusion. "Those metal slugs can't possibly penetrate quantum phase shielding." Thexvar was beginning to understand that he might have made a critical error in judgment. The human vessel wasn't trying to penetrate the shields. It was studying them. Each projectile burst was hitting the shields at different angles, different velocities, mapping the defensive field's response patterns with the methodical precision of a species that had learned to war against itself for thousands of years. "They're analyzing our defenses," he realized with growing alarm. "But that should take weeks of careful study. How are they?" The answer came in the form of 12 simultaneous impacts. The Phoenix had somehow calculated the exact harmonic frequency that would cause the quantum phase shields to destabilize, and fired a pattern of kinetic projectiles that hit at precisely the right intervals to create a cascade failure. The scout vessel's bioarmor immediately began adapting, but the humans had anticipated this as well. Instead of continuing with kinetic attacks that the armor would learn to deflect, the Phoenix switched to its mining lasers, but not in any pattern the bioarmor could predict. The beams weren't trying to cut through the hull. They were heating specific points on the vessel's surface, creating thermal expansion that interfered with the bioarmor's adaptive processes. Admiral Kexthin's voice came through the communication system, tight with disbelief. "Ambassador, they're actually penetrating our defenses. I've never seen tactical thinking like this. They're using our own adaptive systems against us." The demonstration lasted exactly 17 minutes and 34 seconds. When it ended, the scout vessel hung dead in space, its propulsion systems disabled with surgical precision, its bioarmor confused and unresponsive, its quantum shields cycling through error states like a computer trapped in an infinite loop. The Phoenix sat motionless nearby, completely undamaged, its crude hull plating somehow having deflected every defensive measure the scout vessel had attempted. Captain Chen's voice broke the stunned silence. Tactical exercise complete. The scout vessel's propulsion systems have been disabled as requested. No permanent damage has been inflicted. We await further instructions. Thexvar stared at the tactical display, his scales shifting through color patterns he hadn't used since childhood, patterns that indicated fear, confusion, and the terrible recognition that everything he thought he knew about the universe had just proven to be wrong. In the space of less than an hour, a species he had dismissed as primitive savages had demonstrated tactical capabilities that challenged 8 centuries of Corthani military doctrine. They had taken technology that by all rights shouldn't have functioned and somehow made it more effective than the most advanced weapons systems in the galaxy. How, he whispered, the word barely audible in the suddenly quiet chamber. The answer would come soon enough, though Thexvar couldn't have imagined how much worse things were about to get for the Corthani Empire and everything they valued. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within 6 hours of what historians would later call the Phoenix Incident. Representatives from 47 major civilizations filled the vast chamber, their various forms creating a symphony of colors, sounds, and chemical signals that indicated universal distress. Ambassador Thexvar found himself in the unprecedented position of being summoned to explain how a primitive species had just demonstrated technological capabilities that challenged the fundamental assumptions of galactic civilization. High Counselor Zephyxra of the Ethereal Collective raised her crystalline appendage for silence. Her species had evolved beyond physical form millennia ago, existing as pure energy contained within synthetic crystal matrices. When the ethereals spoke, lesser species listened. Ambassador Thexvar, her voice resonated directly into the minds of everyone present. Explain to this council how a species you described as pathetically primitive has just rendered one of your most advanced vessels completely helpless using what you termed scrap metal and hope. Thexvar's throat sacs had been deflated for hours, a sign of such deep humiliation that several species present felt embarrassed on his behalf. High Counselor, we may have underestimated human tactical capabilities. Their approach to warfare appears to be fundamentally different from anything we have previously encountered. Different? The voice belonged to General Krexoth of the Zarathi Dominion, a species that had built their entire civilization around military conquest. His 4 arms gestured aggressively, each one ending in razor-sharp claws that could cut through battle armor. Different doesn't explain how they defeated quantum phase shielding with primitive projectile weapons. Our own military advisors are calling it impossible. Dr. Harrison Kim stepped forward from the human delegation, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the agitation filling the chamber. If I may address the Council's concerns, I believe there's been a misunderstanding about human technological development. The chamber erupted in what could only be described as galactic scoffing. 50 different species expressing contempt in their own unique ways created a cacophony that would have been amusing under different circumstances. Silence, High Counselor Zephyxra commanded, her mental voice cutting through the noise like a blade. The human may speak. We are curious about their perspective. Dr. Kim nodded respectfully toward the High Counselor. Thank you. The Council seems to have evaluated human technology using standards that may not apply to our developmental path. Your species appear to have advanced by perfecting individual technologies, creating the most efficient engines, the strongest armor, the most powerful weapons. Human advancement has followed a different model. And what model is that? Asked Scientist Prime Velter of the Logical Collective, her mechanical voice carrying the dispassionate curiosity of a species that had replaced biological brains with quantum computers centuries ago. Adaptation and integration, Dr. Kim replied simply. Humans don't typically perfect a single solution. We find dozens of partial solutions and combine them in ways that create emergent properties. What you see as primitive and cobbled together, we see as resilient and adaptable. Admiral Kexthan's image appeared via holographic projection from the Corthani fleet. His scales were still shifting through patterns of confusion and something that might have been respect. Dr. Kim, with all due respect to your species' achievements, that doesn't explain how you defeated our defensive systems. Quantum phase shielding operates on fundamental quantum principles. It should be impossible to overcome without weapons that manipulate quantum states directly. You're correct, Dr. Kim agreed. It should be impossible to overcome quantum phase shielding with kinetic weapons, but you're thinking about the problem from the perspective of a species that builds perfect systems. Humans learned long ago that perfect systems often have predictable failure modes. Captain Chen activated a holographic display showing the tactical engagement from the Phoenix's perspective. Admiral, your quantum phase shields operate by shifting defensive fields through quantum probability states. Correct. Incoming energy is deflected by temporarily existing in a different quantum reality. That is simplified but essentially correct, Admiral Kexthan admitted. The thing about quantum probability, Dr. Kim continued, is that it follows mathematical patterns. Those patterns can be mapped if you're willing to sacrifice some projectiles to gather data. Once mapped, the patterns can be disrupted by introducing kinetic energy at precise intervals that force quantum probability collapse. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. General Krexoth was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. You're saying your species treats our most advanced defensive technology as a mathematical problem to be solved. Not just defensive technology, Captain Chen said quietly. All technology. Humans have been fighting wars against our own species for our entire recorded history. We've learned to analyze, adapt, and overcome any system that can be understood, and everything can be understood if you're willing to experiment long enough. High Counselor Zefixra's crystal matrix pulsed with colors that indicated deep thought. This suggests a fundamental difference in problem-solving approaches. Most advanced species seek technological superiority through perfection of individual systems. Humans appear to seek superiority through understanding and exploitation of system interactions. Exactly, Dr. Kim confirmed. The Phoenix isn't advanced because its individual components are superior. It's advanced because every system is designed to work with every other system in unexpected ways. Our fusion reactor doesn't just provide power. Its plasma output is channeled through our hull plating to create electromagnetic fields that interfere with targeting systems. Our mining lasers don't just cut. They can be modulated to generate specific frequencies that disrupt material cohesion at the molecular level. Scientist Prime Velter's mechanical form leaned forward. You are describing technological synergy as a primary design philosophy. This is unusual. Most species optimize individual components for maximum efficiency, which creates predictable weaknesses, Captain Chen pointed out. If you know how a system is optimized, you can find ways to force it outside its optimal parameters. Human military doctrine is based on the assumption that any enemy technology can be defeated if you understand how it works. Ambassador Thexvar finally spoke, his voice carrying none of its earlier arrogance. Captain, are you suggesting that your species has developed this approach specifically to counter advanced galactic technology? No, Ambassador, Captain Chen replied. We developed this approach to fight each other. The fact that it works against galactic technology is an unexpected bonus. The implications of that statement rippled through the chamber like a shockwave. 47 civilizations suddenly realized they were looking at a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of war against enemies, using the same basic technological principles they were. General Krexoth's voice carried a note of something that might have been professional admiration. Captain, what is the longest war in human history? Dr. Kim answered, that depends on how you define war. The 100 Years' War lasted 116 years, but it was really a series of connected conflicts. The Reconquista lasted nearly 8 centuries, but if you're asking about continuous active warfare, he paused, consulting a data pad. World War II lasted 6 years and involved nearly every nation on Earth, 70 million casualties. World War I lasted 4 years with similar global involvement. Global involvement? High Counselor Zefixra's mental voice carried overtones of disbelief. Your species fought wars that engaged your entire planet. Multiple times, Captain Chen confirmed. We've had 2 conflicts that could be classified as true world wars, dozens of regional wars involving multiple continents, and hundreds of smaller conflicts. At no point in recorded human history have all human nations been simultaneously at peace. The chamber erupted again, but this time the sounds were different. Fear. 47 civilizations were beginning to understand that they were dealing with a species that had never known true peace, that had spent their entire developmental period locked in constant warfare against enemies using identical technology bases. How do you maintain civilization under such conditions? Asked Diplomat Supreme Inthara of the Peaceful Federation, her musical voice carrying harmonics of distress. We adapt, Dr. Kim said simply. Humans don't see warfare as an aberration to be avoided. We see it as a natural state that requires management. Our entire technological and social development has been shaped by the need to survive in a constantly hostile environment. That explains the tactical demonstration, Admiral Kex then said slowly. You analyzed our defensive systems the same way you would analyze an enemy human fleet, looking for weaknesses, testing responses, developing countermeasures. The scout vessel represented a puzzle to be solved, Captain Chen confirmed. Quantum phase shields, bioadaptive armor, and advanced propulsion. Individually, each system was more advanced than anything humans have developed. But systems that advance tend to be complex, and complex systems have exploitable interactions. Scientist Prime Velter's processors churned through calculations at light speed. The mathematical implications are staggering. If human tactical doctrine is based on defeating peer-level technology through system exploitation, their effectiveness against superior technology would be exponentially greater. Which brings us to the reason we're here, High Counselor Zephyxra said, her mental voice cutting through the growing chatter. The question before this council is no longer whether humans deserve membership. The question is what happens to galactic civilization if we deny membership to a species capable of analyzing and defeating our most advanced military technology. General Krexoth's 4 arms crossed in a gesture of defensive posture. High Counselor, are you suggesting we grant membership based on threats? I'm suggesting we grant membership based on capability demonstrated under controlled conditions, she replied. The humans have proven they can overcome our defensive technology using what they consider primitive equipment. What do you imagine they could accomplish with access to truly advanced galactic technology? The chamber fell silent as that implication sank in. Every species present suddenly understood that they were facing an unprecedented situation. Throughout galactic history, advanced civilizations had always maintained their dominance through technological superiority. The humans had just demonstrated that technological superiority could be overcome through tactical innovation and adaptive thinking. Ambassador Thexvar found himself in the surreal position of advocating for the species he had spent the morning mocking. High Counselor, perhaps we should consider the human request more favorably. Their approach to problem-solving could benefit the Council's ongoing conflicts. Conflicts? Captain Chen asked quietly. The Void Collective, General Krexoth explained reluctantly. A machine intelligence from outside our galaxy that has been probing our outer territories for the past 50 years. Their technology operates on principles we don't understand, using materials and energy sources that don't exist in our reality. Every engagement has resulted in defeat for Council forces. Dr. Kim and Captain Chen exchanged glances. Something passed between them, a look that made every species in the chamber suddenly very nervous. You're fighting an enemy using unknown technology that operates on unfamiliar principles, Captain Chen said slowly. And your response has been to counter with more advanced versions of familiar technology. That is correct, High Counselor Zephyxra admitted. That's exactly the kind of problem humans are good at solving, Dr. Kim said. Unknown technology with unfamiliar principles is just another puzzle. You study it, test it, find the patterns, and exploit the weaknesses. General Krexoth's claws extended slightly. Dr. Kim, the Void Collective has destroyed 17 Council fleets using weapons that appear to manipulate space-time itself. They consume entire star systems to fuel their advance. This is not a problem that can be solved with primitive human tactics. Captain Chen's expression remained neutral, but something in her eyes shifted. General, with respect, you're thinking about this wrong. You're trying to match their technological advantage. Humans learned long ago that you don't have to match an enemy's advantages, you just have to make their advantages irrelevant. Explain, demanded High Counselor Zephyxra. You've been fighting the Void Collective the way galactic civilizations fight each other fleet against fleet, technology against technology. But the Void Collective isn't a galactic civilization. They're something else entirely, which means they probably have weaknesses that no galactic civilization would have. Dr. Kim nodded. Machine intelligences, especially ones from outside our reality, tend to be very good at optimizing known variables and very bad at dealing with chaotic variables they haven't encountered before. Are you suggesting? Scientist Prime Velter's processors whirred audibly as she processed the implications. That human tactical unpredictability could be effective against an enemy that has defeated all conventional council forces. We're suggesting that maybe it's time to try unconventional approaches, Captain Chen said. The Phoenix was built using principles that shouldn't work according to advanced galactic engineering, but it defeated technology that was supposedly impossible to overcome. Sometimes the best way to solve an impossible problem is to approach it from a direction the problem wasn't designed to handle. High Counselor Zephixra's crystal matrix pulsed through a complex pattern that indicated deep consideration of multiple probability streams. When she spoke again, her mental voice carried new harmonics: hope, fear, and desperate calculation. Captain Chen, Dr. Kim, would your species be willing to analyze void collective technology and tactics as a demonstration of the benefits of human council membership? The two humans looked at each other again. This time, the expression that passed between them made every warrior species in the chamber feel a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. "We'd be happy to take a look at your void collective problem," Captain Chen said in that same flat, professional tone she'd used all day. "But we should probably warn you, humans have a tendency to solve problems very thoroughly. When we're done, there might not be much of a problem left to worry about." General Krexoth's 4 arms moved in a gesture that was either blessing or prayer. For the first time in 50 years, someone was talking about the Void Collective as if they weren't an unstoppable force of galactic destruction. They had no idea what they were about to unleash. The tactical briefing chamber aboard the Corthani flagship had been hastily reconfigured to accommodate human physiology, though the results looked more like an attempt to furnish a supply closet than a proper meeting space. Captain Chen sat in a chair that was slightly too large for her frame, while Dr. Kim hunched over a table designed for species with different arm configurations. Lieutenant Rodriguez stood behind them, occasionally making notes on a device that looked primitive compared to the holographic displays surrounding them. Admiral Kexthan gestured toward the main display, his scales shifting through patterns that indicated reluctant respect mixed with lingering skepticism. "These are the compiled records of every Void collective engagement over the past 50 years. 47 separate encounters across 12 star systems. Total council casualties, 173 vessels, ranging from scout ships to full dreadnoughts." The holographic display showed a progression of battles that told a story of escalating desperation. The first encounters had been exploratory single council vessels investigating strange energy readings at the galaxy's edge. Those ships had simply vanished, leaving behind only debris fields that defied analysis. As the threat became apparent, larger fleets had been dispatched, with predictable results. Dr. Kim leaned forward, studying the tactical recordings with the focused intensity of a man solving a puzzle. "Admiral, these battle records show consistent patterns in Void collective behavior. They always engage at range using energy weapons that appear to manipulate local spacetime. They never close to weapon range that would allow counterattack, and they seem to prioritize targets based on what criteria? We haven't been able to determine their targeting priorities," admitted General Krexoth, who had joined the briefing via quantum communication link. "Sometimes they focus on command vessels, sometimes they target ships with the most advanced technology, sometimes they appear to attack randomly." Captain Chen had been quietly studying a different set of data, casualty reports, and ship classifications. "They're not attacking randomly," she said suddenly. "Look at the pattern of which ships survive longest in each engagement." Lieutenant Rodriguez activated her portable analysis unit, a device so crude by galactic standards that several Corthani technicians had expressed disbelief that it functioned at all. The display it projected was equally primitive, simple two-dimensional charts and graphs that looked like something from humanity's pre-digital age. "Captain's right," Rodriguez reported. "Survival time correlates inversely with technological sophistication. The most advanced ships get destroyed first, while older vessels with simpler technology last longer." Admiral Kexthan's throat sacs inflated slightly. "That's impossible. Advanced technology should provide better defensive capabilities." "Not if your enemy's weapons are designed to exploit the quantum interactions that make advanced technology possible," Dr. Kim said thoughtfully. Admiral, you mentioned that Void collective weapons manipulate space-time. Can you be more specific? The holographic display shifted to show detailed weapon analysis from the few Council vessels that had managed to gather sensor data before their destruction. The readings were unlike anything in galactic databases, energy patterns that seemed to exist partially outside normal space, creating effects that violated known physics. Their primary weapon appears to generate localized space-time distortions, Admiral Kexthan explained. The effect is to create regions where physical laws operate differently. Advanced technology that depends on precise quantum states simply stops functioning. Captain Chen and Dr. Kim exchanged one of their looks again. This time, Admiral Kexthan was beginning to recognize the expression. It was the same look they'd shared just before the Phoenix had systematically dismantled his scout vessel's defenses. So they're using weapons that create technological dead zones, Captain Chen said slowly. Regions of space where advanced technology doesn't work. Essentially, yes. Our bioadaptive hulls stop adapting. Quantum computers fail to maintain coherent states. Energy weapons lose coherence. Even basic systems like life support begin to malfunction as the technological sophistication increases. Dr. Kim pulled up chemical formulas on Rodriguez's primitive display. But basic technology, simple mechanical systems, chemical reactions, kinetic energy, those would still function normally. Theoretically, yes, but what combat effectiveness could primitive technology have against enemies capable of manipulating reality itself? The answer came from an unexpected source. Lieutenant Rodriguez had been quietly running calculations on her analysis unit while the others talked. Admiral, request permission to show you something. Admiral Kexthan's scales shifted to patterns indicating polite attention. Proceed, Lieutenant. Rodriguez activated a simulation program that looked like it had been designed by children. Simple geometric shapes moved across a flat display, representing ships and weapons in a visualization so basic it was almost insulting. But the mathematics underlying the simulation were complex enough to make Corthani computers pause. This is a tactical simulation based on recorded Void collective behavior patterns, Rodriguez explained. I've modeled their weapons as creating spheres of technological disruption with decreasing effect as you move away from the impact point. Now, watch what happens when we introduce kinetic projectiles fired from outside the disruption zone. The simulation showed something that made every advanced species in the briefing room fall silent. Simple kinetic weapons, nothing more than accelerated chunks of metal, passed through the technological disruption zones without any loss of effectiveness. They couldn't be stopped by advanced shields that no longer functioned, couldn't be deflected by energy fields that had ceased to exist, couldn't be countered by defensive systems that had reverted to inert matter. The Void Collective's weapons are designed to counter advanced galactic technology, Rodriguez continued. But they might be completely ineffective against primitive kinetic weapons, because kinetic weapons don't depend on any technology more advanced than basic physics. General Krexoth's voice carried overtones of disbelief. Lieutenant, are you suggesting that primitive human weapons could be effective against an enemy that has defeated our most advanced fleets? I'm suggesting that the Void Collective has optimized their weapons to defeat galactic technology, Rodriguez replied. They probably have no defenses against weapons. They've never encountered weapons so primitive that no galactic civilization would consider using them. Dr. Kim was nodding as he studied the simulation data. It makes sense from an evolutionary warfare perspective. If you're fighting enemies who all use similar technology bases, you develop weapons that counter that technology. But humans develop their warfare techniques fighting against identical technology bases, so we learn to win through tactics rather than technological advantage. Captain Chen stood and began packing, a habit that made the Corthani officers nervous since her movement patterns were completely unpredictable by their behavioral models. Admiral, I need to understand something about Void collective tactics. Do they attempt to communicate? Have there been any attempts at negotiation or surrender demands? None, Admiral Kexthan replied immediately. They attack without warning, destroy everything in range, then harvest the debris and move on. Our xenopsychology experts believe they may be a purely machine intelligence with no capacity for communication. Or, Dr. Kim said quietly, They're so far beyond galactic civilization that they don't recognize us as intelligent life worth communicating with. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Every species present suddenly realized they might be dealing with an enemy that viewed galactic civilization the same way galactic civilization viewed primitive microorganisms. Which creates an interesting tactical opportunity, Captain Chen continued. If they don't recognize galactic civilization as a legitimate threat, they've probably never bothered to analyze galactic tactics. They've optimized their strategy to deal with advanced fleets using predictable engagement patterns. Lieutenant Rodriguez pulled up another simulation, this one showing void collective movements through conquered systems. Look at their approach patterns. They always attack the most advanced installations first: orbital shipyards, quantum communication arrays, biotechnological research stations. They're systematically eliminating high-technology targets. They're sterilizing systems of advanced technology, Dr. Kim realized, which means they probably don't expect resistance from low-technology sources. Admiral Kexthin's scales were shifting through colors that indicated he was processing concepts his species had never encountered before. Dr. Kim, are you suggesting that the Void Collective might be vulnerable to primitive tactics because they've never encountered primitive tactics? I'm suggesting that an enemy optimized to fight advanced galactic fleets might be completely unprepared to deal with weapons that work by throwing rocks very fast, Dr. Kim replied. General Kreksoth's voice carried a note of desperate hope. Captain Chen, could human tactics be effective against Void Collective forces? Captain Chen stopped packing and faced the holographic display showing 50 years of galactic defeat. General, human tactics were developed to fight enemies using identical technology and similar resources. The key to human warfare isn't having better weapons, it's using available weapons more effectively than your opponent expects. The Void Collective expects to fight advanced fleets using energy weapons and quantum technology, Rodriguez added. They don't expect to fight primitive vessels firing kinetic projectiles and using chemical explosives. Dr. Kim activated another section of the simulation. But more importantly, they don't expect enemies who treat technological disruption as a temporary inconvenience rather than a death sentence. Human vessels are designed to function when systems fail. Every critical system has mechanical backups, chemical alternatives, and kinetic options. Admiral Kexthin studied the primitive human technology assessments with new understanding. Your fusion reactor has chemical backup systems. Your weapons include kinetic alternatives. Your navigation systems can function without quantum computers. The Phoenix was designed to fight in environments where advanced technology might not work, Captain Chen confirmed. Every human military vessel is built assuming that anything electronic, quantum, or biotechnological will eventually fail under combat conditions. Because you developed your technology fighting wars against opponents who would specifically target your most advanced systems, General Kreksoth said, understanding beginning to dawn in his voice. Exactly. The first rule of human military engineering is that the enemy will find a way to make your best weapons useless. So you make sure your second-best weapons can still win the fight. Lieutenant Rodriguez highlighted specific sections of Void Collective tactical data. Admiral, look at their post-combat behavior. After defeating galactic fleets, they spend considerable time harvesting advanced technology from the wreckage. They're specifically interested in quantum computers, bioadaptive materials, and energy manipulation systems. They're studying galactic technology, Dr. Kim realized, learning how to counter it more effectively, which means they're constantly adapting to defeat more advanced galactic weapons, Captain Chen said. But they've never needed to adapt to defend against primitive weapons because no galactic civilization uses primitive weapons. Admiral Kexthin's scales had shifted to colors indicating a mixture of hope and terror. Captain, are you suggesting that human forces could engage Void Collective vessels with a reasonable chance of success? I'm suggesting that human forces could engage Void Collective vessels using tactics they've never encountered and weapons they've never needed to defend against, Captain Chen replied. Whether that translates to success depends on how quickly they can adapt to completely unexpected threat parameters. There's only one way to find out, Dr. Kim said quietly. General Krexoth's four arms moved in a pattern that indicated military salute among his species. Captain Chen, Dr. Kim, Lieutenant Rodriguez, the Council formally requests that human forces engage the Void Collective in combat as a test of tactical effectiveness. Captain Chen's expression remained neutral, but something in her posture shifted. General, how many ships are you talking about? A single engagement or a sustained campaign? The Void Collective is currently advancing on the Kepler 442 system. 3 inhabited planets, 12 billion citizens, and the most advanced biotechnological research facilities in the galaxy. Our projections indicate the system will fall within 72 hours. And you want us to stop them, Dr. Kim said. It wasn't a question. We want you to try, Admiral Kexthin admitted. Because if human tactics fail, at least we'll have learned something before the Void Collective reaches the inner systems. Captain Chen looked at Dr. Kim and Lieutenant Rodriguez. The three humans shared a moment of silent communication that made every alien species in the room feel like they were missing something crucial. Admiral, Captain Chen said finally, we'll need complete tactical command of any engagement. No interference from Council forces, no attempts to coordinate with galactic technology, and no restrictions on weapons or tactics. Granted, General Krexoth replied immediately. And when we stop the Void Collective advance, Dr. Kim added, the Council agrees to full human membership with all associated rights and privileges. When, Admiral Kexthin's throat sacs inflated, Dr. Kim, surely you mean if you stop the advance. Dr. Kim's expression was mild, almost apologetic. Admiral, humans don't plan for failure. We plan to win. The only question is how much of the Void Collective will be left when we're done. As the briefing ended, and the humans departed to prepare their forces, Admiral Kexthin found himself staring at the tactical displays showing 50 years of galactic defeat. For the first time since the Void Collective had appeared, he felt something he'd almost forgotten how to experience. Hope and a growing suspicion that the galaxy was about to discover what happened when an unstoppable force met a species that had never learned the meaning of the word impossible. The human fleet that emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system defied every principle of advanced military doctrine that had governed galactic warfare for millennia. Admiral Kexthin watched from the command deck of the Corthani flagship as 17 vessels appeared in formation, and his first thought was that someone had made a terrible mistake in the fleet composition database. The ships looked like they had been assembled in someone's backyard using spare parts from a dozen different construction projects. The largest vessel, presumably the flagship, appeared to be built around the skeleton of an asteroid mining platform, with weapon pods welded to its hull at angles that violated every aesthetic principle his species held sacred. The smaller ships were even more bizarre. Converted cargo haulers, retrofitted exploration vessels, and what appeared to be an actual garbage scow-mounting weapons that looked like they'd been salvaged from decommissioned orbital defense platforms. Admiral, his communications officer reported, scales shifting through patterns of confusion. The human fleet is requesting tactical command codes and real-time intelligence feeds. Grant their request, Admiral Kexthin replied, though part of him wondered if he was making the greatest mistake in galactic military history. And patch me through to their flagship. Captain Chen's image appeared on the main display, transmitted from what looked like the control room of a factory rather than the bridge of a military vessel. Behind her, human crew members moved with efficient purpose around consoles that appeared to have been cobbled together from multiple different technology bases. The overall effect was chaotic, unprofessional, and somehow deeply unsettling. Admiral, Captain Chen said in that same flat tone she'd used throughout their previous encounters, we've completed our approach and are ready to begin engagement. Our scouts report Void Collective forces are approximately 4 hours from reaching the outer system defense perimeter. Captain, your tactical assessment. 17 Void Collective vessels, ranging from what your databases classify as corvettes to battleships. Standard approach pattern. They're advancing in formation toward the most technologically advanced targets in the system. She paused, consulting something off-screen. They'll reach the orbital research stations around Kepler 442c in approximately 6 hours. Admiral Kexthin studied the tactical display showing both fleets. The Void Collective formation was elegant, precise, and utterly terrifying. 17 vessels that moved with the perfect coordination of a machine intelligence, their hulls seeming to bend light around them in ways that suggested technology beyond current galactic understanding. The human fleet, by contrast, looked like it was held together by determination and prayer. Their formation was loose, almost random, with individual ships following flight paths that seemed to serve no discernible tactical purpose. "Captain," Admiral Kexthin said carefully, "your fleet deployment appears to be unconventional. Are you certain your tactical approach will be effective?" "Admiral, has conventional tactical deployment been effective against the Void Collective so far?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. 50 years of galactic military doctrine, rendered useless by an enemy that operated outside the established rules of warfare. "Point taken," Admiral Kexthin admitted. "Proceed with your engagement plan." What happened next violated everything Admiral Kexthin understood about fleet tactics. Instead of forming a battle line to engage the Void Collective at maximum range, the standard galactic approach, the human vessels scattered across the system like seeds thrown to the wind. Some headed toward the asteroid belt, others dove toward the system's inner planets, and several simply disappeared from sensors entirely. "Captain," Admiral Kexthin said, trying to keep panic out of his voice, "your fleet appears to be dispersing. How do you intend to concentrate firepower for the engagement?" "We don't," Captain Chen replied calmly. "Concentrated firepower is exactly what the Void Collective expects. They've optimized their weapons to defeat massed formations using advanced technology. So we're not going to give them massed formations or advanced technology." On the tactical display, the Void Collective fleet continued its inexorable advance toward the research stations. Their formation remained perfect, their targeting priorities unchanged. They had detected the human vessels, but their behavior suggested they didn't consider scattered, primitive ships to be a significant threat. That assessment lasted exactly 47 minutes. The first attack came from the asteroid belt, where 3 human vessels had taken position among the larger rocks. But they weren't firing energy weapons or launching quantum torpedoes. Instead, they were using mining charges to accelerate chunks of asteroid at velocities that pushed the limits of what kinetic weapons could achieve. The Void Collective point defense systems, optimized to intercept sophisticated guided missiles and energy beams, were completely unprepared for simple rocks moving at significant fractions of light speed. The first salvo of kinetic projectiles punched through their formation, causing no damage but forcing them to alter course for the first time in 50 years of galactic warfare. "Interesting," Dr. Kim's voice came through the communication link. "They do have defensive capabilities against kinetic weapons, but they're not optimized for high-velocity, low-technology projectiles." The second wave of attacks came from 5 different directions simultaneously. Human vessels that had seemed to be fleeing were now moving in complex patterns that brought them into firing position from angles the Void Collective had never needed to defend against. But again, they weren't using weapons that galactic military doctrine would recognize. One ship fired what appeared to be modified construction equipment, magnetic grapples and industrial cutters operating at ranges that should have been impossible. Another launched a spread of what looked like cargo containers, but the containers exploded into clouds of metallic chaff that interfered with Void Collective sensors in ways their technology couldn't compensate for. A third vessel appeared to be firing its own hull plating at the enemy armor sections, accelerated by electromagnetic launchers that turned defensive materials into kinetic projectiles. "Captain Chen," Admiral Kexthin said, fascinated despite himself, "your weapons appear to be improvised from civilian and industrial equipment." "That's because they are," Captain Chen replied. "Admiral, when you're fighting an enemy that can neutralize military technology, you use civilian technology. When they can counter sophisticated weapons, you use simple weapons. When they expect predictable tactics, you do something completely unpredictable." The Void Collective fleet was beginning to respond, but their response demonstrated exactly why human tactics were effective. Their weapons created the same technological dead zones that had defeated galactic fleets, but the zones were optimized to disrupt quantum computers, bioadaptive materials, and energy manipulation systems. They did nothing to stop chunks of asteroid accelerated by chemical explosives. They couldn't interfere with magnetic grapples operated by mechanical switches. They had no effect on armor plating fired from electromagnetic rails powered by chemical batteries. "They're trying to adapt," Dr. Kim reported from his position coordinating the attack. "Void collective vessels are modifying their weapon outputs to create broader disruption fields, but the modifications are making their weapons less effective against traditional technology. Which means if any galactic fleet tried to engage them after this, they'd face weapons specifically adapted to counter human tactics," Captain Chen added. "But right now, they're caught between optimization states." That was when the real attack began. The human vessels that had disappeared from sensors reappeared exactly where they needed to be, not where tactical doctrine said they should be, but where the Void Collective couldn't effectively target them. They had been using the system's magnetic fields, gravitational wells, and stellar radiation to mask their approach, techniques that worked because they relied on natural phenomena rather than technological stealth systems. The coordinated assault that followed demonstrated why humanity had never known peace. 17 human vessels attacked 17 Void Collective ships using 17 completely different tactical approaches, each one adapted to exploit specific weaknesses in individual enemy vessels. The largest human ship, the converted mining platform, engaged the Void Collective flagship by firing a spread of what appeared to be industrial waste containers. But the containers contained metallic particles suspended in chemical solutions that polymerized on contact with the enemy hull, creating a coating that interfered with their space-time manipulation weapons. Smaller human vessels swarmed around Void Collective corvettes like ancient Earth fighter aircraft, using their superior maneuverability to stay outside the technological disruption zones while delivering kinetic strikes to critical systems. But they weren't trying to destroy the enemy ships. They were systematically disabling specific components to force the Void Collective to choose between mobility, weapons, and defensive systems. The most effective attack came from the converted garbage scow, which had loaded its cargo bays with every piece of metallic debris it could gather from human space. When fired through electromagnetic accelerators, the debris created a shotgun effect that overwhelmed Void Collective point defenses through sheer volume rather than technological sophistication. "Admiral," Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice came through the communication link, "Void Collective vessels are beginning to show signs of adaptation failure. Their technology is designed to counter specific threats, but we're presenting them with too many different threat types for their systems to process simultaneously." Admiral Kex then watched in fascination as the most advanced enemy the galaxy had ever faced began to lose tactical coherence. Individual Void Collective vessels were trying to optimize for different human attack types, but the optimizations conflicted with each other. Ships that adapted to counter kinetic weapons became more vulnerable to chemical attacks. Vessels that defended against electromagnetic interference lost effectiveness against simple mechanical weapons. "They're experiencing cascade failure," Dr. Kim reported. "Their adaptive systems are trying to counter every human tactic simultaneously, but the countermeasures are mutually exclusive. They're essentially paralyzing themselves trying to adapt to threats they've never encountered." The engagement lasted 3 hours and 17 minutes. When it ended, 16 Void Collective vessels hung dead in space, their crews presumably alive but their technology completely non-functional. The 17th vessel, a corvette that had somehow managed to avoid the systematic disabling attacks, was fleeing the system at maximum velocity. The human fleet had suffered damage that looked catastrophic to galactic observers, but apparently didn't concern the humans at all. 2 vessels were leaking atmosphere. Another had lost main propulsion and was operating on maneuvering thrusters, and every ship showed signs of hull damage that would have sent galactic crews into emergency protocols. The humans were treating the damage as routine maintenance issues. "Captain Chen," Admiral Kex then said, his voice carrying overtones he couldn't quite identify, "your fleet has achieved what 50 years of galactic military operations could not. You've defeated the Void Collective in direct combat." "We've defeated this Void Collective fleet," Captain Chen corrected. "The intelligence that controls them will adapt based on what happened here. Next time they'll be ready for human tactics." "Next time," General Krexoth's voice came through the communication link, carrying hope and terror in equal measure. Dr. Kim's image appeared alongside Captain Chen's, his expression thoughtful. General, machine intelligences are very good at adapting to known variables, but they have trouble with constantly changing variables. The key to fighting the Void Collective long-term isn't to find one effective tactic. It's to constantly develop new tactics faster than they can adapt. Which is exactly what humans do, Captain Chen added. We've been fighting wars against opponents using identical technology for thousands of years. We know how to stay ahead of adaptive enemies. Admiral Kexthin stared at the tactical display showing 17 disabled Void Collective vessels. In 3 hours, these primitive humans had accomplished what the combined military might of galactic civilization had failed to achieve in 50 years. "Captain," he said quietly, "what do you need to win this war?" Captain Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her posture shifted. "Admiral, we don't need to win this war. We need to end it. And to do that, we're going to need access to galactic manufacturing capabilities, strategic intelligence on Void Collective movements, and complete tactical authority to prosecute military operations as we see fit." "And in exchange?" "In exchange," Dr. Kim said, "we'll solve your Void Collective problem permanently." General Kreksoth's 4 arms moved in patterns that indicated military salute. "Dr. Kim, Captain Chen, on behalf of the Galactic Council, you have whatever you need." As the communication links closed, and the human fleet began the process of salvaging disabled Void Collective technology, Admiral Kexthin realized that the galaxy had just changed in ways that no one fully understood yet. Humanity had been mocked for their primitive technology and crude tactics, but they had just demonstrated that sometimes the most advanced problems required the most basic solutions, and that a species raised in constant warfare possessed advantages that peaceful civilizations couldn't imagine. The Void Collective had spent 50 years learning to defeat galactic technology and tactics. Now they would have to learn to fight an enemy that treated technological failure as a design feature and tactical unpredictability as a core doctrine. Admiral Kexthin suspected that particular education was going to be very, very painful. 6 months after the Battle of, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session aboard the massive biostation Convergence Prime, a living ship grown by the Ethereal Collective to serve as neutral ground for interspecies diplomacy. The station's organic corridors pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that reflected the emotional states of its inhabitants, and today those patterns showed colors that had never been recorded in the station's 1,000-year history. Fear, wonder, existential uncertainty, and underlying it all, the deep structural vibrations that indicated the station itself was confused by what it was witnessing. High Counselor Zephixra's crystal matrix had grown noticeably dimmer over the past months, a sign that even her advanced energy-based consciousness was struggling to process the implications of humanity's integration into galactic civilization. Around the vast circular chamber, representatives from 93 civilizations sat in stunned silence as they reviewed reports that challenged everything they thought they understood about warfare, technology, and the fundamental nature of military power. 6 months, High Counselor Zephixra said, her mental voice carrying harmonics of disbelief. In 6 months, human forces have eliminated Void Collective presence from 17 star systems, captured intact examples of their technology, and established forward operating bases in regions of space that were considered permanently lost to galactic civilization. Ambassador Thexvar, his scales now permanently fixed in patterns of humility that his species hadn't displayed since their early evolutionary period, activated a holographic display showing the current tactical situation. High Counselor, the human approach to the Void Collective campaign has been unprecedented. Instead of attempting to match enemy capabilities, they have systematically exploited the Collective's adaptive limitations. The display showed a 3-dimensional map of human military operations across former Void Collective territory. What it revealed was not the methodical advance of traditional galactic warfare, but something that looked more like a virus spreading through a computer system, chaotic, unpredictable, and devastatingly effective. "Explain," commanded General Kreksoth, though his forearms were held in postures that suggested he already understood and feared the explanation. Dr. Harrison Kim stepped forward from the human delegation, which now included not just the original 3 representatives, but a dozen military advisors whose presence had fundamentally altered the balance of power in the galaxy. "General, The Void Collective's primary advantage was their ability to adapt to galactic military technology faster than galactic forces could develop countermeasures. Our solution was to ensure that adaptation became a liability rather than an advantage. "Clarify," requested Scientist Prime Velter, her mechanical voice carrying processing cycles that indicated her quantum brain was operating at maximum capacity, trying to understand human tactical doctrine. Captain Chen activated her own primitive display system, which by now had become an object of intense study by galactic xenoarchaeologists trying to understand how such crude technology could produce such sophisticated results. The key insight was that machine intelligences optimize for consistency. They expect enemies to use similar tactics across multiple engagements, which allows them to develop increasingly effective countermeasures. "So we made sure never to use similar tactics twice," added Colonel Marcus Webb, the new human military liaison whose arrival had caused a stir among Council security forces when they discovered his personal weapon was a chemically propelled projectile launcher that had no technological components more advanced than metallurgy. The holographic display shifted to show specific engagement records. Each battle against Void Collective forces showed completely different human tactics: orbital bombardment using redirected asteroids, infantry assaults using personnel equipped with nothing more advanced than chemical explosives and mechanical tools, naval engagements featuring vessels that changed their entire technological base between battles. "This is the Battle of Proxima Centauri B," Dr. Kim explained, highlighting one engagement. Human forces used electromagnetic pulse weapons to disable Void Collective adaptive systems, then followed up with kinetic strikes. The enemy adapted their shielding to counter electromagnetic weapons. "This is the Battle of Wolf 359, Captain Chen continued, showing the next engagement. Same enemy fleet, now adapted to counter electromagnetic weapons, so human forces used chemical weapons, industrial acids that attacked hull integrity at the molecular level. The Void Collective adapted to counter chemical attacks. And this," Colonel Webb said with satisfaction, "is the Battle of Ross 128. Enemy forces now adapted to counter both electromagnetic and chemical weapons, so we attacked them with sharp sticks." The chamber fell silent. 93 civilizations processed the statement simultaneously, their various neural systems reaching the same impossible conclusion. "Sharp sticks," repeated General Krexoth slowly. "Well, technically they were carbon fiber spears fired from mechanical launchers," Colonel Webb clarified. "But the principle was the same. The Void Collective had spent 2 engagements adapting to sophisticated human weapons. They were completely unprepared for weapons that a Stone Age civilization could have built." High Counselor Zephixra's crystal matrix pulsed through patterns that indicated she was consulting probability calculations across multiple reality states. "Colonel Webb, are you saying that human military doctrine deliberately escalates and de-escalates technological sophistication to prevent enemy adaptation?" "Not exactly," Dr. Kim replied. "We escalate and de-escalate to force enemy adaptation into useless directions. The goal isn't to stay ahead of their adaptation, it's to make their adaptation process work against them." Admiral Kexthin, who had been observing human operations for months, and was now widely regarded as the galaxy's foremost expert on human military capabilities, activated additional displays. "High Counselor, human forces have demonstrated the ability to field 7 completely different technological paradigms within a single campaign. Chemical weapons, kinetic weapons, electromagnetic weapons, biological weapons, nuclear weapons, mechanical weapons, and what they term improvisational weapons that appear to be constructed from whatever materials are locally available. The Void Collective's adaptive systems are designed to optimize against consistent threats," Captain Chen explained. "When faced with constantly changing threat parameters, their systems enter a state of continuous adaptation that prevents them from achieving optimization against any specific threat." Lieutenant Rodriguez, now promoted to Major and serving as Human Intelligence Coordinator, pulled up behavioral analysis charts. "Void Collective forces are showing signs of systematic adaptation failure. Their response times are increasing, their tactical coordination is declining, and several fleets have been observed attempting to adapt to threats that don't exist. They're essentially chasing ghosts," Colonel Webb added cheerfully. We'll hit them with kinetic weapons, they'll adapt to kinetic weapons, then we'll hit the next fleet with chemical weapons. But the adaptation data gets shared across their network, so fleets that have never encountered chemical weapons will waste processing power adapting to chemical threats, while we're shooting them with entirely different weapons. The implications of this strategy were beginning to penetrate the consciousness of every species present. The humans hadn't just found a way to defeat the Void Collective. They had found a way to turn the Collective's greatest advantage into a crippling weakness. "How many different tactical paradigms can your species deploy?" asked Diplomat Supreme Inthara of the Peaceful Federation, her musical voice carrying harmonics of worry. "That's a difficult question," Dr. Kim admitted. "Human warfare has been characterized by constant tactical innovation for thousands of years. We've never reached the limits of what's possible." "Give us a rough estimate," General Kreksoth demanded. Colonel Webb consulted a device that looked like it had been built in someone's basement workshop. "According to Earth Military Command, current human forces can deploy 47 distinct technological paradigms, ranging from Stone Age kinetic weapons to experimental quantum manipulation systems we've developed using captured galactic technology." 47. High Counselor Zephixra's voice carried no intonation, which among her species indicated complete cognitive overload. "But that's just current capabilities," Major Rodriguez added. "Human military doctrine assumes that any technological paradigm can be expanded, modified, or combined with other paradigms to create new tactical approaches. The theoretical limit is determined by available materials and energy, not by technological constraints." Ambassador Thexvar's scales had shifted to colors that indicated he was experiencing a form of species-wide existential crisis. "Dr. Kim, are you telling this council that human military capabilities are essentially unlimited as long as you have access to raw materials?" "More accurately, we're saying that human military capabilities are limited only by imagination and logistics," Dr. Kim replied. "Any problem that can be solved through the application of force, chemistry, physics, or engineering can probably be solved by human military forces given sufficient time and resources." The chamber fell silent again as the full implications of humanity's integration into galactic civilization became clear. Every species present suddenly understood that they were no longer dealing with a primitive civilization seeking membership in an advanced society. They were dealing with a species that had just demonstrated the ability to systematically defeat any enemy through sheer tactical adaptability. "What do you want?" General Kreksoth asked quietly. Captain Chen's expression remained as neutral as ever, but her posture shifted in ways that made every predator species in the chamber feel nervous. "General, we want what we've always wanted: peace, security, the opportunity to explore the galaxy and learn from other civilizations. And if those goals are threatened, then we'll remove the threats," Colonel Webb said simply, "same as we've always done." High Counselor Zephixra's crystal matrix pulsed through a sequence of patterns that indicated she was accessing the deepest archives of ethereal memory, consulting the experiences of civilizations that had existed when the galaxy was young. In 3 million years of recorded galactic history, no species has ever demonstrated the tactical flexibility that humans have shown in 6 months of military operations. You represent a fundamental discontinuity in the evolution of galactic warfare." "High Counselor," Dr. Kim said gently, "we don't want to be a discontinuity. We want to be partners. The galaxy has given us access to technologies and knowledge that would have taken us millennia to develop independently. In exchange, we can offer protection against threats that conventional galactic military forces can't handle." "Like the Void Collective," Admiral Kexthin said. "Like anything," Major Rodriguez corrected. "Human military doctrine is based on the assumption that any enemy can be defeated if you understand their weaknesses and exploit them creatively enough. It doesn't matter how advanced they are, how numerous they are, or how alien their technology is." Ambassador Thexvar activated a final holographic display, this one showing current human military deployments across galactic space. 17 fleets spread across 43 star systems, each one equipped differently, each one prepared to deploy completely different tactical approaches depending on the threats they encountered. "Honored representatives," he said, his voice carrying the formal cadences of a species announcing a fundamental change in their worldview. The Galactic Council hereby recognizes that humanity represents a new paradigm in galactic civilization. You are granted full membership rights, permanent seats on all military planning committees, and unrestricted access to Council resources and technology. In exchange, High Counselor Zephyxra added, humanity agrees to serve as the military defense coordinator for galactic civilization, with full authority to develop and deploy whatever military capabilities are necessary to protect Council member species from external threats. Captain Chen nodded formally. The United Earth Defense Force accepts these responsibilities on behalf of humanity. As the session ended and representatives began filing out of the chamber, Admiral Kexthin found himself standing next to Dr. Kim in the corridor outside the meeting hall. "Doctor," he said quietly, "may I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, Admiral." "Are humans actually peaceful, or do you just prefer solving problems through warfare because you're exceptionally good at it?" Dr. Kim considered the question seriously. "Admiral, humans are peaceful the same way a nuclear weapon is peaceful. We prefer not to fight, but when fighting becomes necessary, we're very, very good at ending the fight decisively." As Dr. Kim walked away to join the rest of the human delegation, Admiral Kexthin stood alone in the pulsing corridors of Convergence Prime, watching the bioluminescent patterns shift through colors that indicated the station was still trying to understand what it had just witnessed. The galaxy had spent 50 years learning to fear the Void Collective. Now it would spend the next 1,000 years learning to coexist with something far more dangerous, a species that treated warfare as an engineering problem and had never encountered a problem they couldn't solve with sufficient application of tactical creativity. The universe was about to become a much safer place for galactic civilization, and a much more dangerous place for anything that threatened it. Humanity had finally found their place among the stars, and the stars would never be the same.